this is Jason Hannafeld, and I took a left at the Valley.
I know we shouldn't have to scream that we're atheists. You know, we don't have non-astrologers and all that. But with the religious people taking over the world, I mean, we can either speak up or be pushed into a corner.
I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance, and you just call it faith in unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist.
Coming at you after a lousy day, this is Left of the Valley. My name is Kevin, and my black dentist told me you'd have to put a cap in you. I haven't gone back since.
Oh my god.
Joining me as usual is a team who thinks crushing pop cans is so depressing.
Oh my god. But
Love it.
She caught a pervert on the bus watching porn over her shoulder. Nancy.
That bastard!
Yeah.
You're just sitting there trying to watch porn in peace, and then they're just like, oh, getting in your business.
Yeah.
called privacy.
And she was told sex was sin unless it's doggy style, because all dogs go to heaven. Christina.
Oh, God. They're so bad. You're so bad at jobs.
And she'll say F you politely with all due respect, intercourse yourself. Kirsten.
I would be the one to do that.
Yeah, you would.
Ladies, welcome back. Hope you had a great week.
I don't know.
No. You weren't quite there? Okay.
Well,
Not really.
I was sick this week.
Be told. Not really.
And then stressing over trying to get ready for a job interview while being sick and be like, no, of all the days for it to hit.
Yes, of course. So we were supposed to be talking to Dave today, Dave Warnock today, about he's got ALS, and we were supposed to talk to him, but unfortunately he had to cancel that and push it further down the road. But we got our old friend Robert Stanley will be joining us today on the show.
Yay.
And that's in the second half of the show. So first, let's do a bit of chit-chat. Let's start with some good news. Did you guys hear the council in Calgary, in the province next door?
Yes, I did hear this.
Canada, that's in Canada's oil country, unanimously passed LGBT conversion therapy ban.
About time.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that is great news, especially in Alberta, which is, for our American audience, Alberta is basically our version of Texas.
Yeah, totally.
Right. So.
But still more progressive.
Yeah, apparently still more progressive, nonetheless.
Much more progressive.
Of course, this long discredited practice to attempt to change sexual orientation or gender identity, of course, has been debunked so many times it's not even funny anymore.
It was never funny.
The WHO and the Canadian Psychological Association says it poses a severe threat to human rights and the health of the victims of this so-called therapy. So, and the law is passing. So, also it points to any businesses offering this kind of service would be fined. It seems like very positive. I'm just wondering though if they offer this as a religious. Not as a business, but as a religious therapy from a church. Could they get away? Could they find a loophole there? I'm wondering. So we'll have to keep an eye on that.
I don't know.
Well,
if they call it like something else, maybe.
Okay.
Who fucking knows?
Also some good news. Did you guys hear that NASA has to actually reestablish contact with Voyager 2?
I did hear about that.
We spoke about Voyager 2 a couple months ago, saying it finally went silent, and it was kind of a sad thing. Voyager 2 is 11.5 billion miles away from Earth.
God damn.
Wow.
It's beyond our solar system at this point. It was launched in the 70s, if I remember correctly. It has returned to taking measurements. It's taking back measurements, going back to its old job, what it was doing.
Welcome back.
And welcome back, indeed. It takes 17 hours to communicate one way to send a message to Voyager, and then 17 hours for it to reply back. So one command to Voyager takes 34 hours to happen.
I mean, when you look at how far away Voyager is, it's not that bad.
No.
Well, that gives you some perspective on the distance, because you can hear numbers and they say, "Oh, that's so long." But when you hear how many hours it takes,
And of
for
course
me, for
it
some
beats
reason,
snail mail.
Yeah, it puts it in.
And of course, the signal travels at the speed of light too, so
Yeah.
it takes that much time to go. That's where it is, how far away it is. In January 28th of this year, NASA informed that Voyager 2 had shut down for unknown reasons. They were supposed to try to execute a maneuver. It was supposed to trigger a 360-degree turn on it, but apparently it didn't trigger that. It didn't do that maneuver, and that triggered apparently a software protection shutdown program. This is what they think actually
Oh, so it was
happened.
kind of a safety thing.
Kind of a safety thing. He said, okay, we're not sure what's going on here, shut down, you know.
Smart.
Yeah, but for the technology of the time, it's a bit, it's amazing that this little thing still goes on.
How did they get it back?
We'd have
is
to
there
ask somebody at NASA
Yeah.
for that.
I wonder whether they've been
Aliens.
working. I
It
wonder
was
if they've
the
been working
aliens.
all this time.
Tech wizards.
Yeah, tech wizard.
Yeah, I guess it shut down part of its program, but I guess the reception from Voyager 2 was still open to receiving a message from NASA, and somebody said, "Hey, wake up," and Voyager kind of responded. Okay,
Kind of went into sleep mode.
Yeah.
Kind of hibernation.
okay.
It's kind of fun that they can get Voyager back after all of these years. But the Iowa caucuses couldn't get their information back and forth, with the minimum delay. Technology is fun, except when it isn't.
God damn that whole clusterfuck.
Well, it's just, but they kept at it. They had the paper trail.
Yes.
And finally, it came back. So, my feeling about it is, maybe the app wasn't properly tested, but they used every resource that they could, and they got the accurate results. I realize people are still going to be, skeptical about it, but I'm on the positive side of they kept the paper trail. People were up God knows how many hours to get it right, and everything in the end turned out, maybe not as perfectly as they had originally planned, but they worked around it and did it.
I just
so
wish the
congrats
Americans-
to all those people that put in all those hours to make sure
Yeah.
that the results came in as accurately
I
as
just wish
possible.
the Americans would go back to the system like we've always had a paper ballot, and we never have these issues.
Yeah.
Never, ever have these issues in Canada.
We do electric scanning of our paper ballots.
Oh yeah, no, that's
The scan scan,
to
but
some
then we have
extent.
the paper ballot.
It's still
as
a paper
backup.
ballot. You're still a pencil, a number 2 pencil. You're still writing, and and then they just count them manually. And we never ever have these issues that they have in the States. These issues of pushing a button on the machine and it's somebody else that appears to have you voted for. We'd never ever have these issues.
Well, this was a more complex issue in that it was a caucus, and they had different ways of calculating who was ahead depending on how many people attended, and then they had a first counting, and then they had a second counting, and then they had a formula. So, and then they had the app. So it was the app that was dealing with all of these 1,600 precincts in the states that was at it more than the voting machines itself. So it was a heroic effort to overcome the original glitch from the app. So that's okay. You guys are heroes, and I know that was a glitch, and you got a lot of criticism, but you overcame it, and thank you.
No offense, it never should have gone to the app in the first place.
Yeah.
Run by a company called Shadow. I mean, it's suspicious from the beginning.
Such a
It's
Doctor
like,
Who
Jesus
bad
Christ.
guy.
But anyway, it kind of is a precursor of what can possibly happen, especially with the Russians and the Republicans, putting their thumb on the scale between now and the election.
And of course, in more American news, Trump finally acquitted in the Senate.
Surprising.
Yeah.
You didn't see that one coming.
No. And but the surprise was that Mitt Romney, of all people, stood up and spoke up against this.
Yeah.
And that was a surprise. Bland as white bread Mitt Romney
I think
decided to find his spine, so that's kind of cool.
the one thing that leaves... Sorry, I'm trying to formulate sentences right now.
Yeah, that's kind of the point.
Trump, if Romney didn't go against his party and vote to convict Trump, they could have been like, oh, it was like the Democrats, it's just like a one-sided thing.
Yeah.
But now they can't.
No.
Nobody can look at this situation and be like, it's just the Democrats, because Romney, the previous presidential candidate, the one the whole party got behind, saying this is our guy, voted to convict Trump.
And he's the first in history to actually convict somebody of the same party for an impeachment.
Yep.
That's the first time in history that's
when
happened.
you listen to his speech about why he did it, he rips his party members a new one.
Yeah, he put a lot of his faith into it, which, you know, as atheists, it's like, yeah, okay, you roll your eyes, something like that.
But the thing is, for his party, that means a lot.
Yeah,
so
but
that means everybody who's Republican listening to that is like, wait.
I have a feeling he's genuine, actually.
Same, totally.
I have a feeling he's genuine about this. I actually feel that he does really think his faith is telling him to do this.
Well, I don't think anyone who followed Trump and then listened to the evidence and listened to the witnesses that were brave enough to come into Congress would ever think anything other than he's guilty as hell. I mean, there's no doubt.
There's a lot of people
I was skeptical at first about Romney because I thought, well, maybe he made a deal with Mitch McConnell that, okay, you know, Mitch said, go ahead, you're going to be the only one that's not going to affect the outcome, so you're taking your own career into some risky business, but go ahead if you want to do it. And then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, okay, there's some moral courage here. So I'm beginning to think more favorably of him, and I'm definitely thinking favorably. Is it Doug Jones from Georgia who stood up against his constituency, you know, and said, this is the right thing to do. Yeah. So both of those men, you know, in the light of
I didn't hear the Doug Jones thing.
Yeah.
Well, he's a Democrat.
He's a Democrat, and he's one who's
he's in Alabama.
That's right.
He's in Alabama.
Yeah, you're right. In Alabama, and he's just a new senator, and most of his people are Republicans, his constituency, and
so
he stood up and said, "This is the right thing to do." Yeah. So you got two people, you know, who are putting their careers in jeopardy for doing the right thing. What does that say about our whole society? That
it says
to
our
do the right
happy
thing,
to be Canadian,
and then you have the Vindman brothers who are in the White House working for Trump and the administration, who tell the truth, and then right after they get fired. What has happened to morality and truth and justice and the American way?
No, the America now is now a banana republic. It's just I have no way to look at it but that.
They'd have to get better to be a banana republic at this point. You know, they've got a goal.
I hate to say it, but it's true. It's like...
It's jaw-dropping. I can no longer think of adjectives that are bad enough to express how I really feel. You can go deplorable, you can go disgusting, you can go unbelievable. Doesn't make it, there are no words anymore to how far they've fallen.
It's just a mess. If somebody right now was to come to me and offer me a job where I have to move to the United States and make $150,000 a year, I would actually decline. More than I'm making now, and I would actually decline because that country is such a mess right now.
But
I would not feel safe in that country.
No, but there's a part of me and there's a part of everybody that should say, with everything the United States has been through, they've pulled out of it. They're still here. They're a democracy. An election is coming up. People have to pull together and be and give everything they have to righting all the wrongs that have been done over the past, 3.5 years. If they don't, God help them. From a little atheist girl, God help them.
Yeah, and the funny thing is all the I've always looked at the Americans as a lot of American in the public always seem to me that kind of attitude that don't tell me what I'm going to do kind of attitude, right? The Americans have they're much less pushovers than us Canadians, for example. Canadians are always let's get along, let's compromise. But Americans like, fuck you, I'm doing this my way.
I prefer the Canadian way personally.
Maybe so, but that's not the point. The point I'm trying to make is the events that have been happening in the United States throughout the entire Trump regime, and I'm not going to use administration.
Oh no, it's totally a regime.
I
They have
would-
concentration camps.
If you had asked me 20, 30 years ago to make a bet, which country would see something like that first, I would have put Canada first. Because I think it's not for sure with a president like that the United States would be, the streets of the United States would be running with people and riots all over the place and saying, no, we had enough of this shit. But no, they've turned out to be complete sheeps. All of them. And it's just amazing that not even 30%, maybe 30% of the entire United States seems to be holding the other 70% hostage, and they're just taking it. Pardon my crude language here, but they're just banging them over and just raping them in the ass. And they're just taking it and taking it and taking it, and nobody has the guts to stand up to Mango Mussolini.
The thing is, though, a lot of people are standing up.
I'm going to have to disagree with you. And all of a sudden, the name. What is the name of the organization that has really started all of the protests? There are a lot of protests going on. It's Ezra Klein's group.
I have no idea.
Okay. Maybe that's why. But there is a lot of resistance. There's a lot of protest. There are letters and calls and rallies that are going on in all of the states. I'll think of it in about 10 minutes. There is resistance that's going on. The difficulty is that the resistance at this point, as powerful as it is not getting through to the 435 people in Congress and the 100 people in the Senate who make the decisions.
No, this is what I mean. I think
they're not sheep. They're doing their best and between them and the investigative journalists, they really are trying to keep the truth, from the public.
Would you at least allow me to give to me basically that if the resistance was that strong, and if those politicians actually felt that their job was on the line, they would not be caving to Donald Trump. They cave to Donald Trump because they feel that the 30% that responds to Donald Trump is stronger than the 70% that supposedly resists.
The thing is,
there are 51 or 53 Republicans out of the millions, out of 300 million. Those are the ones who are controlling the legislature.
And they feel that they have the 30% behind them, and that 30% is stronger, more vocal, and more boisterous than the 70% that is apparently against this.
And we're going to find out whether they're right or wrong, aren't we?
So far, they've been right, because they keep doing it.
Yeah, is it indivisible? It's indivisible. The group that is having.
Oh, okay, the Ezra Klein thing.
No, they really are, and the Democrats, Adam Schiff and the people in the Congress, they've really been working hard. The problem is that the Republicans, I think, unfortunately, have the majority to make the political decisions. I don't think they're all sheep.
They have the majority simply because they're not afraid of the public. They're not afraid of the people. They're not afraid of the constituents.
Yeah.
And they feel safe with the 30% of Trump cult.
But the other thing we need to take into account is that in the 2016 election, the Democrats took back the House, and
2018,
and there was the resistance that did come through in the vote.
Yeah.
So they did show that they're unhappy with the way things are going.
And the way the Iowa caucus is going now, they might screw the 2020 election.
Well,
the way they're going. Anyway, we could go on this forever.
Hey, we had a political discussion.
We always do.
We did. I know that was a good one.
Last but certainly not least, did you guys hear a little? Unfortunately, some bad news. Last Thursday, Antarctica registered 65 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 18.3 degrees Celsius.
Yikes!
In Antarctica.
That's concerning.
Insane.
At Argentina's Esperanza
It's
Research
the middle
Station.
of winter.
Well, over there it's their summer.
Oh, right there below.
But nonetheless, the previous record was 63.5, and which is 17.5 degrees Celsius. That was in March of 2015. This was the same temperature. They were having the same temperature in Antarctica that they had at San Diego. Just to give you an idea.
That's concerning.
It is.
But
like
where would you rather be?
Antarctica. Less people.
The summer it's the summer in the southern hemisphere. The WMO, which is the World Meteorological Organization, hasn't confirmed the record yet, but they are just about to do that. The temperature has been up in Antarctica of 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 3 degrees Celsius, in the past 50 years. Of course, the scientists are concerned because they say there's enough ice in Antarctica to rise the water levels around the world 200 feet. So this is, I'm just glad that climate change is a Chinese hoax, obviously. Good, thank goodness for that.
Happy I live on top of a hill.
We might actually have to be worried about this. All right. Okay, my dear Nancy.
Okay, my dear Kevin.
You gotta tell
You're
Dad.
expecting me to do something.
I do. You
I
gotta
think
tell
I'll do
us.
it then.
All right, sounds good to me.
Just to be nice, since we had a little dust up there between us. But that's good.
I would never disagree with you in private because I know you would just kick my ass. So I do it in public where I'm relatively safe.
At least where he can pretend that he is.
Why? I have a paper trail. If I disappear all of a sudden, you know why.
Oh no.
Do we now?
We're all safe. Anyway, knowing that I really enjoyed the weird and the different, this one has to do with our top 10 book predictions that really came true. So I thought that was kind of interesting. How you can look at novels that were written quite a while ago.
Also The Simpsons.
And see, now, there were people that do predictions as a hobby or as a business, but these are different because they were actually novels that were written.
Nice.
And it turned out that from their fiction came some truth years later. So here we go. The first one that I thought was interesting is Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, and that's way back in the 1800s.
Prediction in Gulliver's Travels?
Pardon?
A prediction from Gulliver's Travels? I'm kind of curious.
Which is kind of interesting. Jonathan Swift, as you know, wrote Gulliver's Travels, and that had to do with Lemuel Gulliver meeting different types of people in different types of countries, and then he had the different experiences that they had, and it was a satire and it was a commentary on life in his time. Well, one of the places where Gulliver went was a country called Laputa. I've never heard it said so. Laputa.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was a country where it's sort of a flying land, and it turns out that the Laputa astronomers discovered Mars had 2 moons, and this is fiction, and this is 150 years before they were actually observed by a astronomer whose name was Asaph Hall. Asaph Hall was in 1877. So when Asaph Hall discovered that Swift's conjectures were actually truer than anyone would have guessed, he found that Swift was really pretty accurate about Mars. So he named the moons Phobos and Deimos in a nod to Gulliver's Travels, and then he had a crater on Deimos that was named after Swift, the writer himself.
Nice.
So I think that's a lovely.
Cool.
It's a lovely story, that it was so accurate, that the astronomer decided to name the moons after Swift. That really is just.
Kind of makes you wish you could go back in time and ask him why he did, why.
Well, as an author, it was probably just a mere coincidence, but nonetheless, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, another one going back in time with Jules Verne. And,
I was about to say, there's got to be Jules Verne there.
Okay, so now in 1865, a time when plumbing wasn't even a regular fixture, Jules Verne, who I guess could we call him the father of modern science fiction?
Well, I think so. I think that'd be warranted.
Okay, so in his book, From the Earth to the Moon, even, plumbing, which was so basic, we don't think of it. His thinking went so far beyond the basics that he predicted a moon landing.
Yes,
just think of it when, there was so little technology. So he predicted a moon landing, which sparked interest in space travel around the world. Aside from the fact that when he wrote it, it was absolutely improbable, the prediction, I think, did spark some interest in how people could accomplish, things like that, even knowing so little about science and how things fit together.
Yeah, however, in Jules Verne's adaptation, you were essentially in a capsule that was essentially a bullet that fired from a cannon, and that's how you went to the moon.
Yeah.
That's kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but nonetheless, he describes gigantic explosions and all that, and it's exactly what a shuttle kind of does today in a rocket. Gigantic explosion that propulses the capsule like a bullet in orbit. So it's very, very close, actually.
Yeah. So here's a more modern one. Philip Roth, a prominent fiction writer, wrote a book in 2004 called The Plot Against America. So it doesn't stand out just because, it was Philip Roth, who, was a wonderful fiction writer. What makes the novel remarkable are the starting similarities between the protagonist's presidential campaign and Donald Trump's actual election,
man.
12 years after the book was published. So in an alternate universe, according to Roth reveals how a demigod celebrity could launch a presidential campaign, and initially in the novel it was seen as a joke by the other party, but his guy, who was named Charles Lindbergh, I don't know whether Roth named it after the real Charles Lindbergh,
exactly.
or did it, but Roth named his guy Charles Lindbergh, so he had no premonition, that it would be anybody named a Trump. But anyway, Charles Lindbergh beats Roosevelt and gains the votes of 1,000 Republicans and right-wing supporters. And just like Trump's campaign, which was sustained by promoting the inadequacy of the Democrats and not through an advocacy of, a real objective or long-term plans, Lindbergh's campaign wins by a landslide. It's considered the end of democracy, and it was believed to be an impossible feat. But fact and fiction, both Lindbergh and Trump went up against people who were better funded, better qualified, and educated. It really makes you wonder what Roth was seeing about our society to predict that someone like Trump, or whether it was just in his mind that this was so unreal. So I didn't read the reviews of the book, nor did I read what Roth actually thought. But the fact that it paralleled is kind of creepy.
Yeah.
That he could have.
Quick side note: just go see Charles Sagan's Demon Haunted World. Yeah. Which was written over 25 years ago, and let him describe exactly what's going on now. It's exactly what's going on.
Yeah, interesting. So two more. This one is by Edgar Allan Poe. He wrote a book called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. So this is a little bit gross here and there, but we'll get through it. So Edgar Allan Poe wrote a book that is the story of Richard Parker. So the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket is a really odd tale, and it was Poe's first novel. And it has to do with the maritime misadventures of Arthur Pym, who went from mutineer to murderer in a few short trips across the Atlantic. So it has to do with the Grampus, which was the name of the boat that Pym was on. The Grampus floods and leaves the crew lost at sea without food or water. So desperate, the crew members draw lots to identify one person who would sacrifice himself to sustain the rest of the crew.
I remember this one.
And so they picked this little kid, 17 years old, whose name was Richard Parker. And now this is fiction, all right?
Why wouldn't you just pick the person with the most fat on their body?
I didn't read the book. I didn't read the book. Maybe Richard Parker was the guy.
Like 17-year-old
who was
kids
the most
aren't
fat on
usually
his
that
boat.
stocky.
Well, I mean, if he works on a boat.
That's true.
Could have been. I mean, he could have been the one. Anyway, 46 years later, Britain's last trial for cannibalism at sea caused a stir in English courts. The details of the morbid events, really, everybody was just really horrified that the fact that this had happened. But the real story had to do with the Mingonet, which was a small yacht that had set sail from Australia, from England. It sank. It left a 4-man crew to fight for themselves aboard a wooden dinghy. Now, this is the reality in Britain 46 years later. Weakened and at the brink of death, the captain and the mate killed a young lad who caved and overdosed on salt water, giving him the crew had not only this kid, but they had salt water. They survived. You want to know what the kid's name was that was sacrificed?
Oh, please.
Richard Parker.
Oh, my God. What
Yeah.
are the odds?
I've heard of that one.
Oh, wow.
Wait, but was he sacrificed or did he just die?
Well, I think
They
he was.
said he killed him.
He caved
I
in
didn't
and
read the book,
overdosed.
but he was.
So they were, like, trying to
no,
make
the
him-
captain killed him.
Oh,
There you
okay.
go.
The captain killed him.
Okay, hear me out. My brain's just like, oh,
Yeah.
he just drank salt water. That's fine.
Yeah, yeah. So
Survival of the fittest.
Jeez.
yeah, I mean that. I mean the names, you know. That,
Yeah, I know. That's something
Yeah.
that gives me goosebumps.
It's like, psychics do exist.
Yeah,
I'm not serious.
Of course not.
yeah. Anyway, there are. If anybody wants to look this up, there were more in this article that had to do with it. But most of the stories were pretty long and involved, and I thought, oh, it's hard to. Hard to get our listeners to sit here and listen to more stories.
There's something
But
very
it just
interesting.
shows you this is a representative sample. And if you want to look up these stories for yourself, there are about 10 stories in the list, and they're from Listverse, Listverse. They're all from Listverse, and it's called 10 Book Predictions That Really Came True. So, interesting if anybody wants to look it up on their own.
I love to have this intellectual conversation with people sometimes, especially when we talk about Jules Verne's. Because Jules Verne's another great piece of his is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where he aptly predicts submarine exploration.
Exactly.
essentially,
Yeah.
Right? And the funny thing is that to Jules Verne's today, in the mind of the public, he's not just an author, he's almost a quasi-prophet. And people really, really, give him credit for being such a visionary. Now, you take somebody that's much more recent to our time, somebody like Gene Roddenberry, who, of course, if you guys are Trekkies or anything like that, you know he's the creator of Star Trek. And he imagined an entire world as well. Now, if we jump 200 years into the future, and the future of humanity turns out to be something similar to Star Trek, will Gene Roddenberry go from being simply an author to being a quasi-prophet himself
No.
as well?
Well, you have to wonder, with Jules Verne, how many 10-year-old boys and girls read the book and they said, this would be wonderful. And it sparked an interest, in science. And, and so they may not have thought, I think I'm going to want to build a submarine when I get older, but I think I would be wonderful as a person searching for these kinds of answers and making this kind of scientific fiction into scientific fact.
Yes.
So did they predict or did they inspire?
For me, it's a lot more of inspiring.
I think I agree with that, and I think it's one of the things that artists are not given enough credit for.
Yeah.
I think a lot of artists do inspire generations and future generations to go beyond what we have. And if it's not for that moment, if I go back to that series of Star Trek or something like that, can we deny today that the flip phone was not because of the telecommunicator
or the iPad,
and all the even guys like Steve Jobs have admitted that, and saying, I saw this on the series and I thought, wouldn't that be an amazing thing to have? And eventually 20, 30 years down the road, there it is. So you have to give credit to art and artists for doing something like that. And I think we are doing ourselves a huge disfavor as a society when we don't protect the arts and protect the artists. We have a tendency, we just want to wake up and just go to work and do our routine and pay the bills. But I believe it was, wasn't it Churchill that basically said that when somebody asked him why he was spending so much money on the Monument Men, remember the Monument Men from World War II? No. The Monument Men were a special elite group that was emptying museums and moving the pieces of art.
Oh, okay.
Before the Nazis were coming in, right? Secretly stashing them somewhere. Yeah. And people were asking him the same kind of question we would ask today. Why are you spending so much money on this stuff? We got bigger priorities. And Churchill responded, if we're not defending our arts and culture, what the hell are we defending? Yep. And I think he's absolutely correct. Anyway, moving on. My dear Kirsten.
Yes.
You got another brilliant moment for us?
I do.
Brought to you by religion.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with something a little short and obviously kind of stupid. So, hold your opinions till I'm done. It's not very long.
That's going to be hard. Going to mute myself right now.
Conspiracy theorist Rodney Howard Brown, best known for his holy laughter-based religious ceremonies, was once criticized for not being a Christian. In a recent sermon, he explained how he responded to that critic by telling him how God was the only thing preventing him from committing murder. So I said to the guy, you say that I'm not a Christian? I said, how did you come up with that? Let me tell you how much a believer that I am. I am so much of a believer today that if I wasn't, I would reach across. And I'm talking quietly. Oh, sorry. He's talking very quietly. I said, I would reach across the table right now, I'd grab you by the scruff of your neck, and I would take your head, and I would put you in your bowl of cereal till you drowned. If I wasn't a Christian.
Can't you just feel the love? You know what? If you really need an immoral being with his dusty Bronze Age book to tell you not to kill people, I'm sorry. You're not a good person to begin with.
No!
I don't care how Christian you think you are. You're not a good person.
No!
You're not. Oh my God.
Especially if it's just because somebody's disagreeing with you and saying you're something you're not. Clearly he cares too much about other people's opinions.
Was it the kind of cereal? Maybe you didn't like the cereal.
I don't know, maybe.
I don't know. Restraint is restraint. Some people need a leash.
Speaks
some people need a leash. Some people need a book.
Some people need a muzzle.
Some people need a moral compass. Whatever it is, at least he didn't reach across the table.
I thought for sure you were going to say some people need a bullet.
Yeah, some people need a bullet. But I agree. I agree with you in theory. I really do.
That's what's keeping you from committing murder?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? If it really is what's keeping him from committing murder, keep being a Christian.
Right? Keep being a Christian, but
being a Christian.
Yeah.
I'm concerned for your well-being.
Oh, I'm concerned for the well-being of people around you.
Hey, if he ever deconverts and becomes an atheist, we're all in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's like, kind of wonder what would happen if people like this deconverted. It's not
they kill someone and go to jail.
Well, the funny thing is, before I was an atheist, for the longest time, I used to think, erroneously of course, I used to think that atheism, you could not be an atheist. Because I said, if you actually were an atheist, and you really think that this is the only life you have, why would you waste it going to work? Why would you waste it just doing normal things? You'd be going out there and living to the fullest, snorting coke and shooting hookers or whatever, right?
That's Grand Theft Auto.
But yeah, that's exactly it, right? And of course, I was a kid too, right? But But I actually, to my great shame, I actually used to think like that. So until I reasoned out of it.
The interesting thing, though, is that, what's his name? The guy who said if it wasn't...
Rodney Howard Brown.
Yeah, Rod Howard Brown doesn't realize how few atheist murderers there are in jail.
That's true.
There are more Christians
By far.
Who are convicted of, killing,
Kinda makes you
murder.
wonder.
Yeah, the atheist population.
Maybe if he did convert to atheism, maybe if he did deconvert, he would develop a moral compass.
Maybe it's because we don't have some mystical being in the sky telling us it's okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Anywho, moving on. So, we all know that the Super Bowl happened.
Really? What's that thing?
I don't know. Something where they play with the ball.
Okay.
They have a big show in the middle. So, Dave Dobbenmeyer plans to sue the NFL because the Super Bowl halftime show is keeping him from getting into the kingdom of heaven.
Uh-oh.
Okay. He watched the Super Bowl, now he can't get into heaven?
On his Pass the Salt Live webcast, he threatened to sue the National Football League for broadcasting
Please do it.
unsolicited crotch shots during the
Please
Super
do
Bowl
it.
halftime show.
Please do it. I want this to happen so badly. Please sue him.
That's what he said. I think we ought to sue. Would that halftime show, would that have been rated PG? Were there any warnings that your 12-year-old son, whose hormones are just starting to operate, was there any warning that what he was going to see might cause him to get sexually excited? I think we ought to go sit down in a courtroom and present this as evidence of how whoever put on the halftime show is keeping me from getting into the kingdom of heaven. Could I go into a courtroom and say, viewing what you put on the screen put me in danger of hellfire? Could the court say, that doesn't apply here because the right to produce porn overrides your right to not watch it? Yeah, well, you didn't tell me I was gonna watch it. You just brought it into my living room. You didn't tell me there was gonna be crotch shots. That's discriminatory against the value I have in my house. You can't just do that. I want to sue them for about $867 trillion.
Oh my God. Now, first of all, as a former,
I want to be part of that suit.
As a former teenager who was 12 to 16-year-old, raging hormones, a simple wind change will give you an erection at that age. So you might as well sue everything. You might as well sue the wind. You might as well sue a billboard. You might as well sue Jessica Rabbit.
So number one, the guy obviously doesn't have an off button on his TV. Number two, I didn't watch. What the heck is he talking about?
There was a show with J-Lo and Shakira, and they were having some pretty suggestive dance moves.
They were wearing like bodysuits as well, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's J-Lo and Shakira.
Oh, okay.
They were shaking it. Let's
Oh, they were
put it this
shaking.
way,
Okay.
They
What
were
you
just shaking.
expect to happen.
The same thing you do after each show here, Nancy. They were doing the same dance.
Okay.
They got that routine from you, obviously.
Okay, so then it comes down to he obviously doesn't have an off button on his TV.
Yes.
There goes the 83 trillion mil. I'm off the suit
And
now.
he's obviously a middle-aged man that is so repressed in his sexuality that as soon as he sees a halftime show, he can't contain himself.
Well, he did.
Think about it. He's so horny that he had to call his lawyer.
I think this is a marital issue.
Like,
Somebody, Patreon go. Let's buy him a sex doll.
I love how he like talks about like a 12-year-old boy watching it, and then he's like, "I'm not getting into heaven."
Yeah, that's right. You're not getting into heaven because.
I'm the victim here. I'm the victim.
It's like.
I'm pretty sure in his imaginary fantasy land, St. Peter's going to be at the gates and say, you know what? You had the choice of turning off the button at the Super Bowl.
That's right.
Super Bowl, whatever it is, and you watch, you're going to hell.
But the crotch shots captivated him. They held him. It was the devil.
Yes, absolutely.
All I gotta say, hon, go jerk one off. You might feel better.
Yeah, well, I'll take one off for Shakira's crush. I'll take one for the team.
I would too.
Oh, thank you so much for this.
You do find the best stories, Miss Kirsten.
Man.
I could not have that. Like, come on.
No, yeah, it was
Wanting
it was
to
a gem.
sue the Super Bowl for $867 trillion because of them, you're not getting into heaven.
Yeah, exactly.
Poor guy.
So let's take a quick pause, and when we come back, we'll be speaking to Robert Stanley, our friend Robert Stanley of the Right to Reason podcast. So stay with us. Tonight on A Current Affair. What is brewing in that soup?
It's really fun to make up fake bombings for the kids to watch.
Secular soup, that is.
We understand. In this movie, we're the bad guys.
This relatively unknown podcast has crept up the charts and looks to take over America by storm.
And to a certain extent, this is who we are. I mean, all of my neighbors are terrible fucking people.
What does it mean?
I don't want to vag-splain anything.
What do they want? And what effects does this grilled cheese and tomato soup of a show have on young listeners?
When I grow up, I'm going to Bovine University.
Are they a threat to America?
Yeah, I lost 34 friends on Facebook in one day.
We'll take a look at this feminazi communist menstrual show from the pit of hell and their hostesses.
We are unabashedly trying to make money with this podcast. Like, we are not quiet about it. Like
that and much more on A Current Affair.
In a world torn apart by a lack of reason,
Or lease.
and I think it should be religion treated with ridicule and hatred and contempt, and I claim that right.
In the morning.
Hi, everybody. This is Robert Stanley from the Right to Reason podcast. And if you subscribe now, you'll get free.
Learn more about the broadcast at therighttoreason.com.
Who thinks the world was created by a man in a cloud in 6 days who then needed to rest. I love that. He's so powerful he can create the universe, but then he's pooped. I mean, how can we have the same brain?
I'm sorry to say we don't have the same brain. I mean, there's great variation. One of the main principles of the Darwinian theory is plenty of variation for natural selection to work on. And there's sure enough plenty of variation in brain power. All the way from Einstein on the one hand to Sarah Palin at the other.
All right, our next guest is our returning champion, Robert Stanley, the host of Right to Reason podcast. He's a snappy dresser and a snazzy dancer. Robert, thank you for coming back to Left of the Valley.
All right, happy to be here.
You say that, man. You owe us a favor.
Hey, he's a repeat offender.
He is a repeat offender, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He gets all our respect.
Robert, I totally appreciate you coming on the show, and as per our agreement, I agreed to bring you back on the show, and you agreed to stop sending me your dick pics, right?
Yeah, this now I can still send you like balls.
Well, but yeah, we might have to bring you back on the show for another one for that one. Robert, for our new audience members that might not have heard you the first time or the second time or the third time around, maybe you'd be so kind to give us a quick bio as to who Robert Stanley is.
Is this 4? That's crazy.
I think it is, actually.
I bet it's more than that.
Well, you're one of the returning guests for sure.
There was the Christensen debate. I think that I had already been on a few times before then, too.
I think you also confuse the fact that sometimes we appear on your show
as well.
as well.
Maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah, but we also appear on your show once in a while. Actually, we went on the show once, actually.
Yeah, that's true. You were really awesome with the mythicism one.
Oh, sir. Flattery will get you everything.
Oh, what was his name? Dale...
Oh, I forget.
I wanted to say Dale Jordan because I got Gail Jordan in the brain. I don't know. Dale Glover, that's his name.
Yeah, that sounds right.
He actually does a show called Skeptics and Seekers, and he did. They broke up.
Oh.
I just went on that show to debate Dale, and that's when they told me that they had broke up because they got really mad at each other. So the host of the show was actually giving him a harder time than the guest, than I was. It was kind of funny. But anyway, you asked me about Right to Reason. It's mostly a debate show. We also like to have some fun, but it discusses a lot of broad-ranging topics. Does a lot with religion, philosophy, and a little bit of conspiracy theory stuff too. Like today, I was supposed to talk to a guy that didn't believe birds exist. He backed out on me.
I've been seeing you posting that all week. What's this thing about bird not existing?
Man, I'm going crazy. It's the funniest conspiracy yet. And I was going to have a flat earther debate him.
Oh, really? Oh, that would have been just amazing.
Crazy. But that's going to have to be rescheduled. But in the interim, while I was waiting for this guy to show up, which he never did, I got a hold of the guy that started this whole movement, Peter McIndoe. And if you actually type his name in, like he's the first one. He's been on the news for it and everything. It's hilarious.
Now, when these people are saying birds don't exist, are they saying like the classification shouldn't exist or the actual animal itself?
Yeah, they're saying that in the 1950s, the CIA put out a hit job on all the birds to get rid of them and replace them with drones. And that these are actually CIA spy drones flying overhead, watching us all the time.
So he thinks that every crow out there is a drone?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh my. So the guy who's got a cockatiel.
And they have the ability, like pigeons, to just drop stuff on your head. So obviously, whenever the pigeons are dropping on statues and heads, they have little speakers and cameras in them to. I'm with this guy. I got it. I'm there.
Oh my god.
Oh boy.
Yeah. They invented something called like the Turkey X500 or something like that. That was like a bird killing flying drone. Keep the population down.
So what are we eating on Thanksgiving then?
Lies, Nancy. You're eating part of the system. I have no idea. There's so many questions. But anyway, it's not all goofball stuff. But if anybody wants to check it out, if you haven't already, it's just go to therighttoreason.com and that link to everything.
I cannot recommend this show enough. Robert probably has one of the most fantastic shows. I love to listen to it. Yeah. And you brought out some pretty bang guests, and you had some really deep moments a lot of times. So I really, really appreciate all your work. So if you haven't listened to the Right to Reason podcast, please, by all means, do yourself a favor and please do listen to what Robert has to say. He's quite the goofball, and he's a lovely, lovely guy. So today we're talking since.
Sorry. It's just hard to take you seriously sometimes.
Okay, so I'm not the only one.
Yeah. The whole time you're talking, I'm like, what? You just admitted I sent you dick pics. And they were lovely.
Well, they were a bit small, but that's okay. I'm kidding, of course. So, Robert, you've been studying political science, and God knows, as Canadians, we watch what's going on in the States with great interest.
And popcorn.
And as the dumpster fire that's happening in the political arena in the United States, what the hell are you guys doing down there?
I was going to ask you the same question. I don't know what the fuck's going on, man.
Well, you got a better chance of answering that question than I do. I mean, I'm in a different country here.
Yeah. Well, I think what happened is what's going to happen again. Is this all goes back to the Republican Party kind of taking over as an establishment, controlling what everybody gets to vote for and manipulating everyone that's right-wing, which, right-wing policies are bad. Right-wing people aren't necessarily bad. Everybody has certain conservative or liberal leanings, and while it's not necessarily just a dichotomy, but it whenever you have a two-party system like the U.S., that dichotomy fits pretty well. And they just kept denying what conservative people were interested in again and again and again, and becoming a little bit closer to the center. And eventually they just vote for a populist. They threw an orange Molotov into the system and said, fuck this. And that's what we have now. This is right-wing rage. And that's why it doesn't matter what he does, because the whole thing was a big joke to them. The whole thing was just, who cares? Nobody's listening to us anyway. Well, you're listening now. And that's exactly what they wanted. And that's the same thing that's going to happen on the left. The whole reason that, everybody fell for hope and change. Well, we had a lot of hope. We didn't get a lot of change.
That's true.
Referencing Obama's slogan, of course. And then they wanted to push Hillary, who was not a progressive at all. She was a war hawk. And now they're doing the same thing again, or they tried to do it with Biden. It didn't work. Now they're doing it with Buttigieg.
Yeah, it seems to me from my standpoint here in Canada, it seems to me that, they were trying so hard for Biden, but when they realized the public's just not going for Biden, they just basically switch around to, okay, who does it work? It seems to work against Pete. Okay, let's throw all our money behind Pete now all of a sudden. That's the impression I get. Anything to stop Bernie Sanders.
And then you see what happened in Iowa recently. That's in the U.S. That's our first place of the voting for the Democratic Party. So that kind of sets the stage. And they had this big bungle where they didn't release any of the votes, and then they start kind of just trickling them out. 30%, 40%, 50%. They still haven't released all the votes. And whenever you look into it, it's not necessarily a conspiracy theory, any more than saying, it was a conspiracy theory that Hillary and the DNC and the media were all working together to prevent a more progressive candidate like Bernie Sanders, or anyone else that's progressive for that matter. That wasn't a conspiracy as much as it was a fact. Yeah. Like we saw the evidence with the WikiLeaks leaks. So what's happening now in Iowa is Biden first donated to the app company that was going to be recording all the votes. Excuse me. And then he only gave him like $1,200, and big deal, but just a little creepy. Like, why are you donating to the people that decide who wins?
Yeah, exactly.
That's obviously corrupt as already. And then another candidate, one of the people lower on the list, I can't remember her name. Was it Marianne Williamson or something? It was one of the people that were like, yeah, whatever.
Williamson's still in the race, is she?
No,
I don't think so. Yeah, but or Duval, I don't know. But yeah, so Biden gives $1,200 to the app company, which ironically is called Shadow. Mm-hmm. Is a villain film that you believe it if you watched it on a movie. You'd be like, this is cheesy, Brought
to you by Spectre. Good afternoon, Mr.
Yeah,
Bond.
Exactly. And then another candidate donates a little bit more. It was like $4,000. And then Buttigieg catches on and donates $42,000 to this app company.
Damn.
I mean, at this point, this is getting ridiculous. This shouldn't even be allowed in the first place. It's not like it's a charity, It's a private company, a for-profit company that is deciding who the victor is. It's just outrageous how horrible DNC rules have gotten. And then right after that, there was just a whole lot of issues with how the votes turned out. Bernie's claiming that he had 6,000 votes more than anyone else, more than the highest contender. And the crazy thing is he had his team member, because of the problem in 2016, his team members and campaign members and delegates were taking screenshots with their phones the entire time and recording. So there's actual video and photo evidence of everything that they're claiming.
Which I don't think the DNC was prepared for that. They weren't prepared for them actually going and witnessing and being observers of the process.
Right. So yeah, it's just nuts. And there were certain districts in Iowa where they just left a note for the people showing up to vote, saying we don't have enough people to run this. Just collect all of the votes, count them, and then bring them to us at said location. I mean, it's just outrageous. There was no preparation, as if they really didn't plan on this being a legitimate election anyway.
Do you feel that as a country, I mean, we were saying this at the beginning of the show, here in Canada, when you're voting, we're still going with the paper ballot, and the number 2 pencil. You feel that maybe it was a mistake for the United States to try to go high-tech in our voting system? They should have maybe retained the old-fashioned way?
No, I think it was a mistake to decide that the company that they're going to use is going to be all former members of Hillary Clinton's staff.
Yeah.
I think that's where the error was. All these people worked on Hillary Clinton's staff and are now obviously not going to do anything that's going to promote her previous contender for the Democratic Party. So it's not. I like the idea of moving toward an electronic system to record stuff, as long as we still have a paper backup, and that's what they have here. So fortunately, there are paper ballots that can be referenced to fix this. They're just not releasing the information, and they're not giving any justification as to why it's taking so long.
Now, here in Canada, we have a body that's actually it's a nonpartisan body called Elections Canada, and they're actually at arm's length from the government. Although they're funded by the government in a way, they're at arm's length. They're out of reach, and they're the ones running the election. Is there such a body in the United States that kind of oversees the election, or is it just like a private enterprise thing going on?
Yeah, the latter, unfortunately.
Well, I think every state runs their election independent. Isn't that right, Robert? Isn't that awful? You're the expert.
Yeah, but do they have a federal body?
They have the federal body, but now I think that body has been sort of stripped of its membership, and they're not. They don't have enough people to do anything, if I'm correct. But I think each state is in charge of running their elections the way they see fit. Am I close, Robert?
Yes. The problem is that they all report to either the Republican National Committee or the Republican Convention or the Democratic National Committee.
So the oversight... The independent oversight is...
There is no independent oversight.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think there is the commission, but they've just been slowly stripped of members and not replaced, because the head of it comes on every now and then and starts talking about how limited they are now in being able to, oversee the ethics part of it.
I mean, I would not be surprised by seeing what's happening in 2016 and what seems to be happening in 2020. I would not be surprised if somebody comes up eventually, one of the international members of the G8, and basically says, we have to start actually sending people to the U.S. to oversee the elections.
Well,
and what an amazing thing that would be.
Well, the bad part of it is, if you look at it that way globally, you'd say that the other countries are saying, the U.S. has two parties, corrupt and incompetent, and we've got to keep, and we're going to have to keep an eye on both of them. Where the hell has America gone, in the last 15 years?
Well, it happens every couple decades where the party just has to reset. And obviously, the last time this happened was during segregation. Republicans used to be Democrats and Democrats used to be Republicans. So you'll often hear that common straw man trope from the Republican Party of saying, well, Abe Lincoln freed the slaves and he was a Republican, but it's forgetting that, that there was a major demographic shift that occurred right around the time that, we were trying to decide whether or not black kids could go to school with white kids. So that's what's going to happen next, to pull the crystal ball out over here. But we're going to go through the same violent shift that the Republican Party just went through. And look how powerful of a change it was. We're so distracted by Trump because he's such an asshole that we're really not looking at this in the big picture. People aren't really talking about how subservient all these Republicans are to Trump because of his populism power. And that's, unfortunately, even though we're liberals, we like to win. Unfortunately, that's how big of a change is coming on our side. And it's going to be not somebody, level-headed like Bernie Sanders or even someone like Buttigieg. As much as I think he's scamming everybody here and playing the role with the DNC. That's politics, baby. He's doing what he wants to do or what he has to do to win. And he's not a bad guy, as far as I know. He seems like he'd be a great candidate. I just don't think he has what it takes to beat Trump.
He'd be better. He'd be better than Trump anyway if he was president. Let's put it this way.
But it's not going to be guys like Buttigieg or Biden or Klobuchar or Sanders or any of these people that are running right now. It's going to be somebody like a left version of Trump. It's going to be somebody completely crazy. And, revolutions are bad on the onset. It's not a good thing to have a revolution. The good thing is what that causes later is it gets everything reset, recalibrated. And that's what's going to have to happen on the left. I don't think Sanders, even if he does get the nomination, that he'll beat Trump either.
Really?
Well, and it's discouraging because I look at all the Democrats, and of course everybody's flawed, everybody's human, but I don't see one candidate who can rise above his or her own flaws to become that dynamic or hopeful leader that everybody says, yeah, that's the one. That's the one that we really need, to get us out of this reset or whatever it is that you want to call it, Robert, because I think you're correct. But, it's such a weight on your shoulders to think that the election coming up, as far as we know, is not going to reveal a person that we all feel enthusiastic about. It's going to be hold your nose and vote just to get rid of Trump, at least in terms of us liberals.
Well, I will challenge both of you on this, and I will say this is my prediction. It's only worth that much. I will say if everything goes according to plan, and I think the populist movement is strong enough behind Sanders, that I think the DNC will not be able to stop him unless they do something really outrageous and incredibly flagrant. And if Sanders is a candidate, he will win. That's my prediction.
Well, if he's a candidate, fingers crossed.
I think he will beat Trump.
I'll vote for the candidate, whoever it is.
Oh no! So if I was an American, I'd do the same thing.
Yeah.
But if it was like something like Joe Biden, I would hold my nose and vote for Biden. If it was somebody like Sanders, I'd be first in line. I would trade Bernie Sanders for our prime minister, even with his hair.
I wish you were in the States and could do it.
Yeah, exactly. So like I said, that's my prediction. It's only worth that much. But you don't feel that way, Robert.
Now, a lot of the people that we're hearing from the media are in large cities, and large cities always go blue. Unfortunately, that's not how our electoral college works, and that's not how I think the majority of America feels right now. I think they like having Trump in office. They like the things that he's doing, and the ones that don't care about it are entertained, and the ones that do care about it are, they're just going to support him no matter what because they want to see this system collapse rather than keep going the way that it was.
How does the average American feel about the picture of the United States? Because we're international observers, obviously, and that's the first thing we see is the United States' reputation on the international scale of the world has essentially been trampled into the dust. It's nowhere near the country we used to think of as the U.S., but it seems to me that the average American doesn't see it that way.
No, but the power of propaganda is so strong that people watching Fox News and a lot of YouTube creators, a lot of social media content creators, are all talking about how much America is finally respected again.
Oh my God, really?
People on the right really do believe that you guys are finally respecting us thanks to Donald Trump. It is mind-blowing, the deceptive power that these kind of outlets have. I have no idea how that pendulum just slows down after this, because it's going to swing hard to the left next and swing back hard to the right, and it's just going to keep getting higher and higher. And I don't know where that leads after that.
I don't know. In terms of the overall vote, Robert, what do you think of this? I think the vote or the election for the Liberals, for the Democrats, depends on two groups: the younger voters under 30 and the black voters, mostly women. And if they turn out to vote and they're not suppressed by the Republicans, I think the Democrats are going to win. But if that dynamic and the suppression is too hard, we're not. What do you think?
I don't think there's the racial suppression intentionally as that is represented. That's not answering your question, but if I can throw my own personal critique,
sure. Yeah, sure.
Assault, but
spoken
I think
like
it's
a
more
white man.
It's more of a class issue, and unfortunately, if you're in a particular demographic that has been a slave in the past and then segregated against, and then even has trouble finding jobs and might be focused on by law enforcement more than other races, then you're going to more likely be in the lower financial class generally. So I think that's part of what that is. It's not just a racial bias that currently exists in the U.S. as much as the hyperbole in media says, but there certainly is a class warfare, and whenever you look at that, you can see the races represented very, very clearly, including Hispanic ones. But yeah, to your question though, I agree with you as far as the minority vote and the young people vote, but there's no law. Do you guys have a law in Canada that says that you get a vacation day or it's a national holiday whenever you get to vote?
Sort of. What you do have is your employer has to give you, depending on the province, but usually about 3 to 4 hours if you're having a work day to actually allow you to go vote by law. You need to have some time off. You have to finish your shift early enough to give you time to go vote, or if you can't, if your shifts happen during the entire day for something, I don't know, you're pulling 12 hours, they got to give you time to go vote by law.
Interesting. Yeah, so that just doesn't really happen here. I don't know if there's maybe a law somewhat like that. Have you ever heard anything like that, Nancy, in the U.S.? I haven't.
No, I think I've read a lot of protests about it, saying that there should be.
Yeah, there is a movement to make it a holiday.
But also in Canada, we also have a pretty good period of early voting, at least a week, and published, and you can register to vote at the early vote. You can register, and it's very open. It's a system that is transparent the way voting should be. Yeah, you moved, that's okay, come on, we'll take care of it. Yeah, no problem.
To vote in Canada, you got to make a minimal effort.
Yeah, right? And they have the voting rolls, and you've got to prove that you're a citizen, but it's not done to discriminate. It's just done a little bureaucracy here. We got to make sure you are who you are, and then if you got a problem, it's settled really pretty quickly. Yeah. Yeah, there haven't been too many protests about the process.
Yeah, well, the minority vote and the young people vote really has a big bearing on what financial level they're at.
Yeah.
As to whether or not, I mean, they have had their labor rights crushed so much that they don't feel like they have a voice. Mm-hmm. So they don't think it would matter if they voted anyway. And for the most part, they're correct. I mean, obviously, if you have Clinton running against Trump, you can vote for one of them, and there is one that's better than the other. Mm-hmm. But the fact that you didn't get to decide who you were offered in the first place means that it really, you really don't have a representation, a constitutional republic. So they're not wrong in that regard, and that's kind of the whole point of Noam Chomsky's critique, is just that we're not really represented in this country because we don't get to decide who is running. They decide that, and we're seeing that playing out live right now in Iowa.
It seems to me like the American system is in a hell of a mess. Is there, as a citizen of the U.S., Robert, and living in Texas, is there any appetite for Americans to go beyond the two-party system that you guys have? Is there an appetite to actually have a third and a fourth party?
Well, you got to have a party that's really gonna bring it. They have to have a movement behind them, kind of like Trump does, kind of like Sanders does. You're not seeing that with the Green Party. I voted Jill Stein, which I know was a throwaway vote, but I couldn't vote for Trump or Hillary in 2016. Mm-hmm. I really couldn't. But if you're going to offer me the chance to use my vote in support of environmental regulations, that's obviously a safe place as far as my conscience can go. But I would have happily voted Libertarian, even though there's a lot of things I disagree with Libertarians about. I think they need to be on that stage because they're asking questions about anti-war policy, immigration issues, things that people on the left would be shocked of how much we actually line up with that party with. And people on the right would line up with libertarians on a lot of stuff as well. But that seems to be what we hear the most, because the loudest libertarians are assholes. But I think there's going to have to be a big movement. And as long as we're putting people like Jill Stein out there or Gary Johnson from the libertarian angle, you're not going to get that. We almost got it with Ron Paul. Mm-hmm. He had a pretty big movement behind him. But and think about that debate stage. Even though he didn't have a chance of winning, if you go back and play some of those recordings of things that he was saying, the whole audio, he would say something like, "What are we doing in Iraq? Let's get out of there. We shouldn't be in the Middle East at all. Leave these people alone." And you just hear all these people just booing like, "Ooh," and then the crowd would slowly rumble, and build into just mad applause. People standing up going like, "Oh my God, I hadn't thought of that." Yeah. And this was way back. Mm-hmm. And people were just starting to hear ideas like, let's just stop policing the world. Maybe they won't be mad at us. And you're not hearing that from any side. You're not even hearing that from Sanders, really. The only candidate that seemed to really be representing that angle was Tulsi Gabbard, and they shut her down quick. And who came out and called her a Russian asset immediately? Mm-hmm. Hillary Clinton.
Exactly. No, the whole U.S. policing the world has always been an incredible phenomenon to me. I mean, it's not like the world's ever asked for the U.S. to police the world, but they've just taken that onto themselves. And I think a lot of countries in the world, including this right here in Canada, saying, "Well, what are you guys doing? You don't need to do this," But
Europe asked us pretty hard. That was a long time ago.
Rand Paul was charismatic, and all of a sudden, what's his name from Texas? The guy that just died recently.
McCain?
No, that had the business running out of. You know who I'm talking about, but my mind is just absolutely a blank. Who ran as a third party and then said he couldn't do it because he got a lot of hate mail. Pardon?
Ross Perot?
Ross Perot. Yeah, Ross Perot.
I loved Ross Perot.
Ross Perot.
He's hilarious.
Said a lot of stuff that made sense, but he wasn't the right candidate. But I have to applaud what he did, and for him staying in the race. He just didn't. In the end, he didn't. He faded. He pulled himself away. But that was the closest I think that we've come in decades. To having an. And matter of fact, I have a Ross Perot sweatshirt.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's like a
collector's. I can say that I love Ross Perot. I just love that Ross Perot, like that kind of person, existed. Yeah. But it's just that they're out there, they're putting that's what we need, and
we do.
That's why I don't know how to answer your question as far as like what kind of a party system we could ever get in the U.S. that's not just two party. I mean, it would have to be a movement, but even long before that, just having that message out there, and that's why I think it gets shit on a lot by the left, but the freedom of speech is the most important freedom that you have, and it's even more important than life.
I find it interesting when they say, for example, you're looking at politics right now, and like I said, from an international observer, of course, point of view, they say, for example, somebody like Sanders is too far left. Which, to me, I just shake my head because, Sanders would be viewed anywhere else in the world, including this country, probably much as a centrist. There is no left party in the States. I mean, the whole country is right-wing by far. Yeah. I mean, and even the most staunch conservative here in Canada, I don't think would be fit enough to be a Republican in the States half the time. It's amazing that you have the entire country saying, "Oh, the policies of Sanders and the policies of Warren and the policies are too far left." To say, really, you guys have no idea what left really is at this point. You think? How do we remedy that? What is it about the Americans that they can't seem to be able to see outside of their borders to how other countries are doing things?
Yeah, I would ask you the same thing. I don't know, man. It seemed to happen. We were just talking about World War II just now, but right after that, it just seemed to start sliding more and more right. And even Sanders, who they think is just some kooky socialist, he'd be center in your country or in Europe, but it's. I have no idea. I think that'd just be a good thing. We just fireball right now. What different ideas as to why that started to occur? We can at least bracket this because we know when it began. FDR was worshipped like a king.
Yes.
So pre-World War II, we weren't really that way. In fact, Republicans were really pushing for environmentalism more than Democrats. That was one of their major party messages.
Conserve the environment.
What at the other Roosevelt, Teddy, that started all the national parks. Yes. So I have no idea, man.
I don't know, but
and even in the 70s, what was it, Nixon?
Yeah, I was going to go there, so I'm glad you did.
Well, go ahead, please.
No, go ahead and say what you're going to say, because it'll be be identical, and you sound and are a lot smarter than I am. So go.
I don't think. But either way, he passed all the Clean Water Act, and cities in the U.S. were just covered in smog. Some still are. California, good example. Somehow, all the left leaning cities are the dirtiest and trashiest. It seems. I don't know why that is, but it just seems to happen. But either way, the right wingers weren't like they are now. And I don't know what's happening, but the whole country, you're right, as a whole just seems to be sliding more right. And maybe that's just what happens when you're at the top of the pyramid financially.
I was going to go parallel to what you were saying, that up to the era of Nixon, in both parties there were the conservative, the moderate, and the liberal wings. The Republicans and the Democrats could get along with each other and pass legislation in a civil way because they had all three elements. And they managed to get together, and you had the liberal Republicans who were very much like the moderate Democrats. When Nixon wanted to get into office, I think he fractured a lot by going after the Southern Democrats and having that policy of trying to turn those Democrats into Republicans because they were unhappy with civil rights. And once he penetrated the Democratic Party, who were hypocritical and decided, no, we're actually going to come out and be Republicans, I think that's probably when that started. And as I've said, several times, that Kevin is about to beat his head against the wall if I say it again. So la 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 for Kevin. But when Newt Gingrich started his platform of something, it wasn't like Back to America, or America First, but it was pretty much the same, which meant no prisoners, we're right, they're wrong. I think that probably is the era between Nixon and Gingrich, that this really, and the Reagan era. I think that's, I don't know, do you get any of that in your classes, to investigate that era for these kinds of things, or not?
Well, yeah, but my professors would 100% agree with you. And it's so funny because they have to just report you don't really do textbooks anymore, at that point. You're really just reading from the source, but they have to report exactly what happened and what the political scientists have a consensus about what is happening in the U.S. And where I go to school is one of the branches of A&M University that's right next to Fort Hood, a military base. So there's a lot of military guys, which are predominantly they're conservative people. So they will get furious and just, even if the professor's not a liberal, they're just saying this is peer-reviewed journals all seem to have a consensus that this is what's occurring. And you're right. It really seems to be a result of the civil rights change. But they'll just get all upset. Oh, we're not racist and blah, blah, blah. And Reagan did a lot for this country, and trickle-down economics was a success and all that kind of thing. And it's amazing to watch the cognitive dissonance that occurs over a 4-year degree of just going to class with these guys, where in the beginning they really were just so adamant and staunch on their right-leaning stuff. And as they progress, they don't necessarily become liberals. They're not out there all of a sudden in love with AOC or something, but they at least got to start to lose that party loyalty over the years.
That is interesting. Just like we're saying, education will screw up your religious faith, but it seems that education will also screw up your political faith, for lack of a better term.
I mean, I was all about. I had just before I started going to school, I had just read the Communist Manifesto, and I was looking into Marx and Engels a lot, and I was in love with a lot of communist rhetoric. And just over time, I lost a lot of that. I still like the loosey-goosey democratic socialism agenda that Bernie seems to push, but even though it's horrible marketing, but still, that's fine. But that's really not the same thing. Like I was so far left that I was proposing for socialism on things that the government really just doesn't need to mess with. They're obviously not good at certain things. They're good at piping water to your house. They're good at getting trains going across the country. They're good at roads. They're definitely good at defense. But you don't want them to handle everything.
No, I can understand
that. Yeah.
Oh wow. Jesus Christ. Well, thank you so much, Robert, for this educational tour.
Oh, an hour. I can't believe it.
I know, right? Time just flies with you.
I love talking to you guys.
So thank you so much for this educational tour to U.S. politics. That was very, very, very instructive. Mm-hmm. And it seems that we don't agree on absolutely everything, but we see a lot of things in common between our two point of view, my Canadian and our Canadian point of view, and your American point of view. So anyway, for our listeners, if people want to find out more about Robert Stanley and the Right to Reason podcast, where can they find you?
At therighttoreason.com.
There we go.
And also, and just how fast that flew by in the extra or edited out part of the conversation that you can only get by going to the Left of the Valley Patreon. We were just talking about how you guys could do like a 6-hour show or something. Outed it, but after this, you definitely could. I had no idea time flew by that fast.
I told you.
No, we totally could, but if we do a 6-hour show, you'll have to join us for that for sure.
Yeah, well, we'll let you know when we're going to do it. Order in, and then you join us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Robert, when we have the pleasure of seeing you up here in Canada, you have to move up here eventually.
Yeah,
you're not going to stay in Trump and Sand for long.
I want to go into politics here in the U.S.
Really?
I don't think I'll move out. But yeah, once I get some a decent degree that I can use and I
like actual political ambition, like to run as a candidate or to be in the background.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would start off with something like city council, something small, but definitely. That seems to be the only way, and I hate saying this because it's just so cold and machine-like, but it seems like the only way to make a difference is litigiously. Like I love art and I love music and I love the protest themes from Bob Dylan and that sort of thing, but is that really life responding to art, or is it just art imitating life? Is it just art putting out a problem and we have to respond to what that's showing us that we don't want to see? And I think that response is what's important. As much as I want to be a creative soul in the universe, you know what I mean? Like I want to contribute from a place of love or compassion or what have you. That shit doesn't seem to work. So call me a cynic, but I'm thinking if I could just do whatever I got to do to just get that one water tower built in some shitty part of town that's got bad water, or pass some law that makes sure that everybody has equal rights or something. Whatever that's to me, that's my ambition. And so yeah, I'll probably stay here, but I'd love to come visit.
Oh, yeah. We would support you 100%. And here's my question, and I say this in the most respectful and supportive way. In the middle of Texas, I would love to know when you get ready what your strategy is going to be as an atheist to get on city council. I would love if I could vote 12 times, I'd vote 25 for you. I mean, there's no question, and I know you would have the support. But when you get ready, run your campaign by us. I really want to see each step of how you do it, and then when you win, boy, are we ever going to have a celebration. But it's going to take some hard ground work and groundswell to get you in there. If anybody could do it, you can. But share with us how you plan to do it.
Well, yeah, I already have one. But if I told
there you go.
I'd be incriminating myself. That's politics.
That's right. Perfect. Robert, before I let you go, I got to have you say, hi, this is Robert Stanley, future mayor of Texas somewhere. I took a left at the valley.
This is Robert Stanley from the Right to Reason podcast, and I took a left at the valley.
Fantastic. And that was our friend Robert Stanley of the Right to Reason podcast. Always a pleasure.
It is, and the time seems to go
time just
so
flies, Robert.
fast.
It really does.
Yeah, no, it's just like we're sitting here having a cup of coffee, some chips,
absolutely.
and just chatting, and we don't have to watch what we're saying. It's just enjoyable conversation.
Heaven
and
forbid.
it's like the listeners are all here with us, nodding and laughing and having a good. And I hope you are just enjoying the conversation
Absolutely.
with us.
So heaven forbid we should ever actually meet Robert in person, because you remember when you were a teenager and you were just hanging on the corner somewhere and you ended up chatting with your buddies all night till the sun came up. That's exactly what would happen with Robert. I'll guarantee you that.
Well, it's more like a girls' slumber party with me, but same thing.
Same thing. So that was a very interesting look into politics from a student
from the center
of
of
science.
Texas.
Yeah, from the center of Texas. And I'm surprised that we have some differences, but we have a lot more in common. And I think we view the world pretty much in the same way. So that's that was pretty cool.
People are people. We all have our own backgrounds and knowledge, and it doesn't make a difference what country we're in. We may speak a different language, but we have the same philosophies.
Do you think, as an American, he's impressed that us Canadians can really talk politics, U.S. politics with him? I think that makes us kind of impressive.
Yeah, listen,
we discuss politics that much with them.
Most of the Canadians I know talk about American politics better than a lot of the Americans I talk politics with.
Well, hopefully.
And this isn't to say anything bad. It's just that we are, because I'm dual citizen.
Yeah.
We are knowledgeable.
Well, I sure hope we've managed to instruct some of our Canadian listeners and maybe some of our American listeners too as to what actually goes on in their own
Please, I know we say this a lot, but because of what's going on in the States, and you're a listener wherever you are, and we devoted so much time because this is important. Please let us know how you feel. Write us just a few notes or letters, because we would really like to include your comments.
No, absolutely.
On our program. So let us know, and if you have any more ideas for shows like this or your point of view, we're sure open to that too. We want to hear from you.
And like I said, I hate politics as much as the next guy, but I understand its power. So you need to take interest into it, and it's for your own sake and for your family's sake and everything. You really need to get involved. And I hope this show today helped do that. Well, thank you so much, Nancy, for being with me. Thank you to our guest Robert Stanley for being with us today on the show, and thank you for listening. You can find us at leftatthevalley.com. You can find us on Facebook, at Twitter, at LETV Podcast. You can send an email at leftatvalley@outlook.com. You can send your complaints to Nancy on the ground floor, but beware the incoming knife. You can give us a 5-star review wherever you find us. It helps us and helps others find the show. We would really, really appreciate that. Or you can become a patron and support the show. You can go to Patreon/LATV. Okay, coming up, we have Chris Shelton. We'll be talking about Scientology. That'll be interesting.
Oh, yeah. Is that the first time we've talked about it?
It is the first time we've talked about I don't think we've ever talked Scientology before, so that's going to be interesting. Our old friend Thomas Westbrook comes back on the show as well.
Oh, okay.
He's been up to some interesting things. Dave Warnock, that we were supposed to have today, will be coming on the show eventually on the road. We'll
Looking forward to him coming back. Hope he's okay.
Yeah,
well
absolutely.
Wishes to him.
He's just very busy. He travels all over the place. It just didn't happen to work this time. And we'll also have Ben Davis. Our friend Ben Davis is coming back as well.
Always glad to talk to Ben.
And of course, I also have to say we'll be a guest for Jay McGaffick. We'll be a guest on his show. So that's going to be us going on the beginning of March. And also at the very beginning of March, the Secular Soup people will meet their demise once and for all at the hands. This prank war is going to come to an end. It's not going to be a pretty end. And I'm going to say I have the nuclear option, Nancy. I have the nuclear option.
You know, they've been very quiet.
They have?
Did they feel intimidated?
Well, you know what? I will say, Amy, I will, as Canadians, we like to compromise. You surrender now. You will save thousands and millions of lives, and you will end the suffering and the humiliation that I have in store for you. Don't force me to do this. I beg of you. But if you do, that's it. That'll be the end of Secular Soup as we know it.
Secular Soup is cooling off.
Thank you, my dear Nancy. Until next time.
Children are raped by priests, and since they're holy men of God, they get away scot-free.
Oh, whatever you want.
You got to wake up first, right? I can hear go run, get another cup of coffee.
No, I got one right here.
Listen, I'm not being, I'm not putting you down. I'm the same way. I'm just, you and I could probably fall asleep at this particular moment.
Hey, the show's not that boring.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Well, we have to keep listening to your dad jokes.
Hey, those dad jokes got us the best Canadian podcast of the year. So
okay, I can't argue with that.
That's so cool.
It's not.
That is cool, isn't it? Like I said, really did not expect that.
You know what's funny is I thought whenever I saw that, I thought it was like a joke thing that you wrote, and I'm like,
really?
Oh, he made himself the winner, and the only reason I thought that was because that's exactly the kind of goof off thing you would pull, because I saw the Secular Soup thing, and I was like,
yeah,
he did. But yeah, that was a legit victory.
It
right?
was. We were totally surprised.
Yeah.
If you think you were shocked by that, how do you think I was shocked when I started reading that article? Saying, "Holy shit!"
Yeah.